Ireland is the place where whiskey found its name. The home of whiskey distilling, the country that has produced whiskey for longer than anywhere else. Irish whiskey is defined by its people and places. The craftsmanship of our distillers and blenders. Our celebrated home on the island of Ireland, on the very edge of Europe, where the continent meets the roar of the Atlantic Ocean. Irish whiskey has a depth and diversity unrivaled among other whiskies, many unique characters, but one shared spirit. There's always a new Irish whiskey brand or expression to savour, on the shelves of your off-licence, liquor store and online. Discover the depth and diversity of Irish whiskey.
Good evening, everybody. You're very welcome to our fourth episode in our series with the Irish Whiskey Association and Irish Whiskey Magazine in Discover Irish Whiskey. And this evening's topic is an interesting one in the sense that we're discussing premiumization of the Irish whiskey category and where it plays in the international and local market as well. And helping me with the discussion, I have our co-host, John Cashman, who will introduce our four fabulous guests. Good evening, John.
Hey, Serghios, how are you today?
I'm fantastic. Sure, the sun is shining. It's a lovely day, so why wouldn't I be delighted?
That's it. Just watch out for the hailstones. I might fall every now and then, unfortunately. But this doctor, I was just listening there when the video was going on. One of the taglines in the video was many unique characters in the Irish whiskey industry. Well, I think we have a fair share of them on the show this evening. Absolutely. So looking forward to getting their take on what makes Irish whiskey unique, and especially what's in it for the connoisseur and what's in it, where is the premium, the nature of Irish whiskey going. To the guests, I suppose our first guest, and as always in alphabetical order, our first guest tonight is Ruth Dunne. Ruth is the marketing manager for Teeling Distillery. So she's been instrumental in bringing a lot of premium whiskies to the market over the past 3 years since she took up her role. I've known Ruth since she got involved in the whiskey industry. She started off as a brand ambassador for the Kilbeggan Distillery based in the United States of America. And she was unfortunate enough to have to spend 2 weeks in my company in training. And I remember really warm days in tin sheds in Kilbeggan. But Ruth, when she finished up with the graduate program, she joined Dalcassian Wines and became the spirits brand manager for Dalcassian before taking up her present role as marketing manager, probably one of the most sought after roles for marketeers in Ireland. And she took up that role in September 2019, I believe. So Ruth, very welcome this evening.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Our next guest is a recognizable face from the Irish whiskey industry, probably and possibly the most recognizable from the sheer volume of talks and whiskey tastings that he does. Mr. Jer Garland is well known throughout the country as the voice behind some of the most premium whiskies here in this country, from Redbreast to the Spots to premium releases from Middleton. Jer has been fortunate enough to taste, sample and talk about them all. Jer is a 17-year veteran of Irish Distillers and presently leads the BEAT team, the brand education and advocacy team, unless things have changed lately, which they always could have, I suppose. But Jer is fond of picking up a guitar and belting out a tune, and also coming out with the odd Roddy Doyle quote from the Snapper. So I'm sure we'll hear something like that at some stage this evening. Jer, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Our next guest then is a man who really needs no introduction, yet I shall attempt to give him one. Mr. John Quinn. John is a 40-year veteran of the whiskey industry. I know I've been referred to as a veteran, but at least I have John on now, so I can pass that baton over. John began his career with Irish Distillers, working across all the Irish whiskey brands in different markets. And then he essentially followed Tullamore Dew. When Tullamore Dew went to CNC, John started work as looking after the brand in many different markets, Eastern Europe, South America, Australia, basically all over the world. I believe he has visited nearly more countries than the Pope, and he has spoken on more stages than Mick Jagger. I think over 90 countries at the last count. John is, in all truthfulness, he is definitively the most respected voice in Irish whiskey working in the industry today. Whiskey Magazine named him in their Hall of Fame in 2019. And John is also presently the chairman of the Irish Whiskey Association. So welcome, John.
Thanks, John, I think.
It was all nice. And finally, tonight, our final guest is Jarlath Watson. Only in the past week did I find out what Jarlath actually does for a living. He is the financial director of Echlinville, which I had no idea about, and I pity him because now he has to sort out Stephen McGuinness's expenses every month. But moving on, what I know Jarlath for was probably as Mr. Dunnevilles. Dunnevilles is one of the leading premium brands in Ireland today, brought back to life by the Echlinville Distillery, which was the first newly licensed whiskey distillery in Northern Ireland in over 125 years. Jarlath has been instrumental in selecting some of those liquids, bringing them to market, and then, of course, doing the advocacy and traveling around speaking about those amazing whiskies. When not talking about whiskey, Jarlath can be seen zooming by at quite some speed on a motorbike from time to time, and attending good rock concerts. A bit like myself, we have to go to one together sometime, Jarlath. You are all very welcome this evening. So, what I really want to start, and I suppose it's maybe jumping in at the deep end, and I will go with this in the reverse order that I introduced you all. So I will start with Jarlath. I suppose because this talk is about what is in it for the connoisseur, we really need to try to define what premium whiskey means to you, what premium whiskey means to your company, and what premium whiskey means to your brands. So I know not an easy one to start, but it'll be able to guide us for the rest of this conversation. So Jarlath, can you give us your take on that, please?
Yeah, so I guess, what premium, I think, for me, you look at where Irish whiskey is now and where the premium sector is now. We go back 10 years and to the days whenever, we had 2 or 3 premium outlets in Ireland, and there was probably half a dozen premium whiskies you'd actually get your hands on. And that might have been through Celtic Whiskey or duty free or not very many other places. And then look where we are today, on the I wouldn't say faster way, but certainly compared to where we were 10 years ago, we have a huge increase in availability and in the offering, and a huge increase in where we can buy them and ease of buying them and ease of tasting them. What is premium? That's a difficult question. That depends on where you're coming from. That's a very subjective question. It's not objective. I guess for us, it's in the quality of a liquid, but that's what Dunnevilles is all about. Dunnevilles is all about the quality of a liquid. We're very much a liquid on lips company. It's also in the quality of the brand and the quality of the packaging. Shane and Martin, our company, spend huge amounts of time, and are really proud of what they do. And it's also the story you tell, how you project your brand, and the story you tell, and the people that project that, and the people you have about your company, and the people you engage to distribute, and your whole network. So premiumity is all of those things, but from my point of view, it's first and foremost, it's what's in the bottle. And it's easy to say, well, premiumity starts at 10-year-old single malt or premium malt starts at a 10-year blend. I guess to me there's premium whiskies in every category. And that's where it becomes quite subjective rather than objective. I think for us, premium for us is just whatever category you're in, whatever section of the shelf you're in, try and be the best, offering or one of the best offerings on that shelf. And for us, that's what premium is.
Okay, and
get it to a customer in a way that they get in the price point that they're happy to pay.
Yeah, and JQ, would you agree with that? Is it something that's coming from the consumer, or is it something that really the brands are putting out there, trying to be premium?
Yeah, it's like Jarlath says. It can be quite a subjective thing as to what you mean by premium, and you get descriptions on different websites or on different measurement techniques of premium, super premium, ultra premium, meta luxury. All of these terms are used. I think for me, I'd agree with Jarlath in terms of what you put into the bottle. You have to feel really good about, and you have to feel it's of a high standard and quality. And there's every reason to believe that informs what you then decide is your premium or your super premium. I know in the USA, for example, they describe Jameson Irish whiskey and Tullamore Dew Irish whiskey and those main bigger brands, let's say, as in the premium category. That's how it's measured in this IWSR report that you probably know well about, John. They're described as premium, whereas in Europe they're described as standards category. So it's a very subjective and sometimes pejorative term to use the word premium, because you're either confusing or you're clarifying depending on where you're coming from. But one of the things about, if I was a consumer, and I am, although I don't pay as much for my whiskey as the average consumer who buys my brand, let's say. But if I'm one of those, I'm choosing premium, I'm envisaging that I'm paying more for something that there is extra in the bottle, whether that's an older whiskey or whether it has some sort of statement about the quality of, let's say, the grade of the blend, or whether some statement about how it's finished to give it some extra kudos or some extra quality cues. That's, I guess, where premium sits in terms of the consumer, and in terms of the producer, for want of a better term, the distiller, the producing company. It's something that's beyond what the standard might be, and therefore we position it as a premium.
Yeah. And Jer, I mean, with your company, obviously you can have possibly and probably one of the most expensive whiskies in the world. And also, what was that, me? But then, sorry, I just heard something in my head. But also, Jer, you would have some what maybe John would refer to as, or is referred to as, standard whiskies. So do you have a certain set line? Because obviously as a salesperson, you're going to say, well, all my whiskies are premium, and as you should. But to the consumer, is it really the consumer then that is making that call?
Yes, it is. And I go back to Barry Crockett, our Master Distiller Emeritus, and he said something to me that there's no more discerning a person than the person consuming your whiskey. And really it does come back to the drinker. And we know, particularly in the last 15 months, and from all the data, from the growth of our brands like Redbreast and the Spot range, and Middleton in particular, like massive growth, unbelievable. The good growth in the domestic market and internationally, that people are drinking less, but they're spending, they're drinking better, if that makes sense. So they tend to be, say if someone was drinking a bottle of Jameson every week or every month, and now they seem to be buying Redbreast, and they tend to be very happy to spend, significantly more, almost double the value on something, because they feel, I think, getting back to as John saying, that they're getting something more. Is it older whiskey? Is it because it's a pot still? It's simply that added value that you get from it. And really, it goes back to what the consumer thinks or considers to be premium, and like the definitions that we use internationally in the industry are really down to just having some perspective on a global market where you have different taxation, you have different price structures, you have different competitors in those markets. So really, I think when you're talking about premium, I think you really have to go back to the consumer, and they're the people who decide what is premium or not.
Okay, and
Jarlath,
Ruth,
Jer,
Ruth-
sorry, you mentioned there that people are drinking less and more discerning in their choices of whiskey. Is that across the board, or is it a demographic thing as well?
Well, it would be, I mean, the data really from the last 15 months has been off-trade data, and it's either in the Irish market, it's direct sales to, independent off-trade or the multiples, because that's all the channel that has really been open. The on-trade has been open just a little, as the door has only been open for such a short period of time. But we would really feel strongly that this will translate into the on-trade, and the on-trade is so important to us, and it's going to be great when it returns in Ireland, and obviously it's opened in the UK and in the United States and North America, very important markets for us. But we think that this trend, which has been has become habitual to consumers, will translate into the on-trade when it reopens. So that's I see it. I do see it continuing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which Ruth, I mean, as Teeling, as the more recent of the four brands that we're talking about, in my perception, have really gone for the premium section, and also what Jer was saying, very visible in the on-trade, not only in Dublin but across the world. So again, is this a conscious decision, and how did you set a certain target or demographic that you're going after with your liquid?
Yeah, I think so. I suppose Teeling's all about, when it started back in 2011, 2012, there was that gap of the premium Irish whiskey sector for our blend, for small batch. So they saw that gap, and that was where it all started, really. So it's from everything from our small batch up to the 37-year-old, which we launched last year, and everything in between. I think that's what people are looking for, and there was a huge gap in the market for that, and that's the direction that it has gone.
And do you think what Jer said, that because I really want to tease this one out a bit, that when the on-trade returns, that there's going to be a change there as well, because people have been drinking less but better. So when they go back to a bar, do we think this is going to continue, and they're going to be ordering some of the double-digit whiskies rather than the entry level that it would have been drinking previously?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's become more accessible to the consumer as well. They're on their weekends, they're looking to spend that little bit more. They'd usually be going out on a Friday or Saturday night, whereas now, they're drinking at home, so they want to drink something special. And I think that will come into play when the on-trade opens back up now in the not too distant future.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah, fingers crossed.
And is that happening at all age groups? Is it from the younger consumer now looking for a more premium product, or is it, as we said, connoisseurs? Ruth, maybe you would like to answer that.
Yeah, I suppose it's happening across the board, and I think it's happening in more than just whiskey as well. I think it's happening, across gin, wine, and everything like that. And I think, knowledge is power, and people like to talk about what they're drinking now, at home, if they're making cocktails, if they're drinking high-end whiskies. And I do think that it's across the board, whether it's, 30-year-olds or, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, it really is across the board.
Yeah. What about anybody else? Are you finding the same thing, that it's across all age groups and all nationalities, or is it, is there any particular country that is really a strong focus on premium, or is it really across the board?
I think, Serghios, if you look at the Irish market, we're in a market where Irish whiskey is like over 90%. All the whiskey consumed here is Irish whiskey, and in Scotland it'd be the converse, because in Scotland they're going to drink their local product. But if I was to say, I think, the most important market for all of us is the United States, from the point of view of there is no real premium Irish whiskey category in the United States yet. So that's where I see the opportunity for us all to work together as an industry and basically build that category in the United States, across across different Texas, California, these really important markets for Irish whiskey. Like if you think about Irish whiskey was grown at 16% in the US pre-COVID, and if we can, I remember going into a liquor store in Austin in 2018 and going in, and there was huge section of local whiskies, because Texas is big on their own whiskey, and that's cool because they're getting into it. But there was also a decent single malt section of Scottish whiskies, and then when you got to the Irish whiskey, there was like 3 whiskies, and I was just going, there has to be an opportunity here for all of us to grow. It's growing in the Irish market, but it is dominated by the premium section. Premium Irish whiskey is dominated by one brand in particular at the moment, which is driving the category. And it is for all of us, I think Ireland, we can sometimes, because we've all been in Ireland so much, I think we can kind of lose sight of other markets. And I think there's a huge opportunity for us all to work together in somewhere like the US and Russia as well.
Yeah, I suppose I'd add to what Jer, couldn't disagree with anything that Jer or Ruth have said. I think the one thing we need to be conscious of is that because we're talking about connoisseurs, and for want of a better thing to do, just to translate from the French word connoisseur, it just means the know-all, the person who knows stuff, and
we know plenty of them, and I'm one of them.
And that, well, exactly. And that Ruth said that it's about knowledge, and people are learning and more inquiring about what they're eating as well as what they're drinking, and we're all at that, and for lots of different reasons, for health reasons, for societal reasons, for environmental reasons, whatever. So the connoisseur falls into that category, and if take what Jer said, if we were to focus our lives on the connoisseur, we would keep everybody on this call happy, because we're all connoisseurs, geeks, I sometimes call us. But we have to also recognize that what has grown the Irish whiskey industry, and what continues to grow the Irish whiskey, if you like, is the standard. I'm actually not even going to mention my own brand. If you take Jameson, everywhere around the world, Jameson is almost like we're leading the charge for Irish whiskey, and people have come to love Irish whiskey for that reason. What they're learning, and they're becoming the connoisseurs, is that beyond the standards of Jameson and the other brands, my own, is that there are fantastic whiskies that are older, that are different, that are finished in different woods, and that have different whiskey styles coming from Ireland. And premium whiskies account for 5%, slightly less than 5% of Irish whiskey sales.
Yeah.
Now that's staggering. You'd think that 96% or something of Irish whiskey sales are coming from the standard whiskies. So imagine the opportunity we have within the connoisseurship of Irish whiskey, and taking Jer's point about the US, imagine the opportunity we have there. And I suppose as much as we are focused in this call on what's in it for the connoisseur, what's in it for the Irish whiskey drinker is the opportunity to be a connoisseur and to drink higher standards or more expensive or very different variants of whiskies. And to be fair, that's what the bigger brands, if you like, have brought people into the category, and now the stage is set to bring them to the next level so that they can trade up and they can drink more expensive whiskies and know that they come from a place that makes great standard whiskies anyway.
Yeah, I just want to pose a question then to Jarlath, because Jarlath, you kind of started the other way around. You started with a premium range. You didn't have a standard Dunne, for example, when you released. You went with the PX10. Yeah, I mean, you did have a blend for a while, but the push on your side seems to have all been on the premium. And then recently you released the 1808, which you described as a gateway product. And that's, I suppose, to fit into that 96% share of the market that is there. But what was the reasoning behind that, and how did that come about?
Well, I think it was, there's not just one reason for that. There's many reasons for that. Go back to a point that John said about the and he's quite right, the 5% of whiskey being premium. That's probably true of Scotch too. The Scotch do a wonderful thing that they market single malts and sell blends, and I was always just thought that was pure genius, in the way that the Scotch do that, and that's probably something that Ireland doesn't do yet. We need to market our premium products more, and you can see that change. Sorry, market our ultra premium products more, super premium products more. But that is something that the Scotch done very well, with market single malts and sell blends, and probably 95% of the Scotch sales of blends, I would guess. For us, I guess it comes down to size, and it comes down to what we can do and where we can compete. And distilleries of our size and on our budget are never going to compete at a price point, at a certain price point. For us, we knew we could compete in quality. We could compete on what we put into the bottle. And that was what we focused on. And we focused on that for 3, 4, 5 years. And we probably quietly focused on that for 3, 4, 5 years. I recall Stephen McGuinness coming and see us the first time he came to see us, a couple of years ago. And we put the whole range of products on the table, and thinking that he would pick the most expensive malt, and said that's what we lead with. And he goes, guys, the product I need isn't on that table. He picked the 3 Crowns as the closest one to it. But he says the product I need is not on that table. I need an all day, everyday whiskey. I need an 1808, or what became 1808. And that was probably something that, in our stubborn focus on single malts and cask finishing, that we probably missed that bigger picture. And it was only whenever Stephen said it in the room that it became very clear. That's become obvious to us whenever, we go out to the world and try and appoint the tier 1, tier 2 distributors that we're looking for now. That's the products they want. They want that mix and range of products, not just your single cask, not just your PX12s. I don't regret what we've done. We built a brand in quality, and we're trying to feed that quality. We're trying to feed that quality through everything we do, including 1808 and 3 Crowns and everything we do. But I guess the initial concept or thought was, where can we compete? If you're up in the Irish Peninsula with a limited budget and limited staff and limited everything, where can you compete? And for us, we always knew that we could compete. We had faith that we could compete on what's in the bottle, and we concentrated on that for a long time.
Just go back to that. Yeah. Can I just add to that? Not to disagree with Jarlath at all, but to add to it, say that he's right. The Scots are in the same situation. They're better than we are at it, in that it's like 10% of their business is premium, as in the single malts premium section, or maybe it's 5%. But they sell 9 million cases of Scotch premium Scotch whiskey. We sell less than 500,000 or thereabouts, so 500,000 or thereabouts. So that's what I keep saying about the headroom we have, and I think it's a really valid point that when the Scots talk about single malt, they're bringing you into the Scotch thing. But to be fair, the Scotch thing was there, like the general Scotch consumption, Scotch on the rocks and Scotch with soda and all that was there long before the early 60s, when the single malt category in Scotland started to become a thing. So, they've been at it since the early 60s, a bit longer than us in that sense for the single malt. But they did have great marketing for their category that was out there before we really got a hold of it.
And do you think that's down to the fact, and maybe what's playing against us here is one of the subsections of these talks is depth and diversity. Have we too much about diversity to be able to focus on something? Whereas the Scotch just have like blends, malts, grains. We use it for blending, really, So if they're talking premium, they're talking single malts. We have premium single grain, premium single malt, premium single pot still. So is that an issue for us, or how do we go about getting over that?
I think the industry here produces really good quality whiskies, whether it's whether it's single malts, single grains, obviously single pot stills I'm going to be talking about, but also our blends. And look, there's lots of innovation by ourselves in Middleton. There's innovation by all of the distilleries. Like, everybody's trying new things all the time. I think there's much more depth to that innovation that can be achieved in Ireland because of the rules around whiskey production here are more open than they are in Scotland. Particularly single malt is really restrictive. In Scotland, a distillery can really only produce one type of distillate, and usually has one type of wood management program, and it usually involves either a ex-bourbon barrel, a sherry butt of some description, or fortified wine cask of some description, and what they call a traditional cask, which is basically hogshead style cask. Whereas here in Ireland, I think if we can build our reputation on excellence, and as John was saying, they have been at it a lot longer. There really wasn't a premium whiskey category in Ireland, and of any diversity until, I suppose, I'd really look back in the last decade. A decade is really when this has accelerated. And I think the potential for growth is infinite there. If we look at it now, I think there's 240 odd premium Irish whiskies in the premium Irish whiskey category, if you want to call it that, or super premium Irish whiskey. And I mean, there is a lot of there that are priced as premium Irish whiskey, but then, as I said again, it's the consumer who's going to decide what that is. But I think there's a lot more diversity, a lot more innovation, in my opinion, in the Irish whiskey industry. So I see more potential in it, as opposed to looking at the historical gap between Scotch and Irish. Like, we're talking in 100 million 9-litre cases, as opposed to just over 10 million 9-litre case of quiz, and that is a significant gap. So I think there's a lot more road for us to get there in the future.
And
are things
Ruth,
going in the right direction, though? I mean, if we look at sales growth of Irish whiskey as a whole, I think the standard category is growing by maybe 10%, but the premium is growing by far higher percentage than that. So is that saying, yes, the consumer is interested in the premium quality? Obviously, it must be. But we are starting from a very low base on the premium, as John said.
Yeah, like, I suppose, as I say, they were starting from a low base, but if you take Teeling, for example, last year, I think we released something like 15 NPDs, and they were all like 80 to 90% of them were in the, the premium to ultra premium category, and the demand was there for it. Like, obviously you have to build your credibility and everything on your entry levels, and your, the Trinity for us with a small batch, single grain, and single malt. But build your credibility there, and then you get liquid to lips, and then people are looking for what are you providing next? What's next to the market? And I think that's what people are looking for now. That they, obviously not everybody, still some people are only entering the market and they're still looking for what their favorite whiskies are. But I think for the connoisseur, as we describe them now, that they have that bit more knowledge, and there's a huge opportunity there to provide them with these high-end single malt, single grains that have this depth of diversity of flavour.
Yeah. Are you finding, Ruth, that people that are coming in at the Trinity, and I won't call them standard releases, because you've come in, your entry level is premium level. So I mean, your small batch, it's priced as a premium level in terms of. But are you finding that those products, those consumers are actually making the transition? Are they starting with the Trinity and moving up, or are they new customers just coming in at the high level immediately?
I think it's a bit of both. Like, obviously, when Teeling started, there was a lot of work to be done to introduce small batch. We knew we could never compete at the entry level pouring whiskey. So that was where the small batch came into being. And I think there was an awful lot of education that was needed there. But, the gap was seen, as I was saying. And now I think there are more collectors who are looking out for the next thing to come. But I think for the large majority of people, they're introduced to us through the Trinity range. Well, I like to think they are. Anyway, hopefully they are through small batch, and then they discover what it is that we have to offer, and keep an eye on what's coming next.
Yeah. And in terms of, I suppose, across the board, a general question then is, how does brand influence your premiumization of your whiskey? Maybe Jerry, you might want to kick off with that.
I think it's hugely important. With whiskey, there are people who drink certain brands and don't know what type of whiskey they are. They don't really know anything about it, but they believe in the brand. And brands, the brands were created. You think of something again. I'll go back to Redbreast because it is such a leading force within the premium Irish whiskey category. It's helping, recruit these consumers into it so that hopefully that they will find a Tullamore or a Dunnevilles or a Teeling then afterwards. But basically people come to Redbreast because they are pretty confident that they've heard of it or someone's recommended it to them. And that way it's a gateway for them into premium Irish whiskey. And then they can, there is that diversity out there with other distilleries, whether it's Powerscourt or, as I said, Echlinville, or they can come in through a brand that is, they're safe and secure in the knowledge that they're going to be getting a certain quality, a certain level of product that's out there. And certainly I read an article in the Telegraph in March of last year, and basically they were saying that.
Oh, Gerard's frozen on us. Well, actually,
I don't think it was a great point he was going to make, to be fair. He wasn't going to make.
Thanks very much. It wasn't. I just basically, I think brands are really important. And, I think people know about brands before they know, what they are. It's what people, if you think about a new innovation or NPD, as Ruth said, new products that come out, people are coming to you because you have a brand name. And under that umbrella, they're confident about the quality of that brand. So whether it's a Tullamore or Dunnevilles or a Teeling or a Redbreast or a Spot, they know if it's a new product coming from them, the brand is almost like the brand comes before the product, and it's like something new and exciting to try. So I think the brand is massively important, Serghios.
Yeah. Jarlath, what about for you?
We took a different approach to brand building. I'm a massive admirer of what the guys in Teeling done. To start a brand from scratch and build it to what they've done and be so clear and concise in their message. I guess for us, we took a different route where we went back to the history of Belfast, and as much by chance as by design, acquired the Dunnevilles brand. And I guess whenever you acquire a historic brand, if you want to be true to that brand, the blueprint is there for you. If you do a deep enough dive into it, the brand message is there for you, and the blueprint for the future is there for you. When we took the Dunnevilles brand on, we made a mission statement as such to say that we were going to try and put Dunnevilles back at the top table of world whiskies. We sort of knew that was a 25-year job if we ever got to do it, and we're probably more aspirational than being confident in it. But yeah, for us, we have a brand message that comes as much from the history of Dunnevilles as it does from Echlinville, and we try and stay true to that. So therefore, been true to the history of the brand, the design, the advertising techniques of the past, the qualities of the past, the brand messages, the brand values of the past, and you try and incorporate that into your own, into the current iteration of it, but certainly relying on that blueprint from the past. And again, let us say, just hammer home that message of the quality of what's in the bottle. I'm a massive admirer of what Shane and Mark do on the design front, and how true they are to the old design, but yet pulling it through to a modern And with each new release of Dunnevilles, you see, you know, a more modern interpretation, and certainly 1808 is an entirely new interpretation. But again, it's because of the imagery in the bottle and all, it's true to the old brand. So that it's a different approach from other guys, you know, and I guess because you're bringing back an old brand, you're even more conscious that you have to really put liquid in the bottle that's going to stand up to that brand. And that was one of our, you know, that was one of the drivers in my head that kept on saying, you know, driving the quality of our liquid.
Okay.
And John, I feel when I'm listening to both Jer and Jarlath that Tullamore kind of falls somewhere in the middle, insofar as you have this real old heritage brand staying true to the history and the heritage, which is reflected in the label, reflected in what you're saying, focusing on the liquid, focusing on your triple blend, and bringing out in more recent years some very good aged liquids that are certainly competing at that super premium price point. So, I mean, what is the thought process for Turtlemore in that regard?
I mean, look, if we're talking about the branding, and you know, Jarlath saying he changed, he did it slightly differently to how Ruth's company Teeling did it. Like, we're all about branding, and Jarlath, the way Jarlath described how he took an old brand and he lives true to its roots and everything it stood for. It's classic, brilliant branding. That's exactly what you do in branding, in my opinion. So what I feel about branding is, and this is not going to please everybody who's listening to this call, but at the end of the day, people are going to buy the Teeling's whiskey because the brand says something to them. The brand says, that's a quality whiskey. I remember they launched the single batch, whatever. The same with Jameson, the same with Dunnevilles, and same with ours, with Tullamore Dew. There are people who love that whiskey, but we've had to brand ourselves, whether we like the term or not. Branding is essential. It's basic to what you do, because the branding is getting the message that you want to get across to them, which is our whiskey is of a standard, says, delivers a promise, has things to say about itself and where it's come from and its past, its provenance, etc. So, like, we whether we like the idea that marketing has a role or not, when we're all really whiskey drinkers, it has a serious role in terms of building the business. And so for me, it's actually, and I've had a conversation with another old man today in the Irish whiskey business, and he basically says, we're spending millions on trying to build the business. It didn't cost us as much to build a distillery, you know what I mean? And it's so true. You can build a distillery, but do you have enough money to build a brand? Do you have enough money to build a brand so that people are saying, have you tasted Teelings? Have you tasted Dunnevilles? You know what I mean? That's where you want people talking about you. And you do have to spend money to get that point across. But it's not going to work if your whiskies don't deliver. And that's why these whiskies are delivering, and that's why people are talking about them, and that's why they're gaining traction in markets around the world. That sounded like a marketing lecture. I didn't want it to be that. What I was trying to answer the question, John, is, you know, we have to spend a lot of our time focusing on the business in terms of talking to the consumers, particularly in new markets that don't know us or that are getting to know us. And this is what we would have done, let's say, in Central Europe 15, 20 years ago, when we were really starting out. And we launched Tullamore Dew in Czech Republic almost on the day that D.E.W closed their offices in Prague, because there was no future for their whiskey business there. So, you know, the rest is history, you can say, and all that. But you're spending a lot of time in whatever markets trying to get your messages across, and your whiskey has to back it up. So if and when, you know, we launch a new variant, or there's a premiumization message to come from another variant for us, it's on the back of the fact that the consumer who likes Tullamore Dew and has been a Tullamore Dew drinker is reassured by that. And I think I'm speaking for the rest of the lads when I say that too.
There's a fair
That's an awful long way to
from,
an awful long answer, wasn't it? I didn't mean it to be that long.
Well, we got there. I have a long question here from John Tracy, and he says, apologies, has been discussed, right? Do you think the pricing of Irish whiskey, let's go back to it. Do you think the pricing of Irish whiskey is in a trajectory for the foreseeable? Some Irish aged staple whiskies are already pretty high. and I reckon a lot of the consumers are priced out of that range compared to premium Scotch. So, I mean, are we competitive in the premium category? I suppose is the question. Whoever wants to take that one.
Yeah,
for me, I think the answer is yes and no.
Go on, Jarlath.
Yeah. So I think the answer is yes and no. You know, there's certain releases in the last 2 or 3 years that one could question the pricing of. There's other releases that bang for buck lurked at the bottom of the century. You know, and it overall, you know, I don't necessarily think that the average is overpriced. Where it's going to go in the next 5 or 10 years will depend very much on the growth of Irish whiskey worldwide, basic supply and demand. You know, we are, you know, as whiskey production is a 3, 5, 10, 20-year thing. You can't just make it to demand. You know, I mean, the whiskey we're selling now was distilled 10, 15, 20 years ago, you know, so it's not very reactive. It's not very reactive to current market conditions.
Does it come down to the lack of available aged stock as well? Obviously, you know,
also, sorry, before, I think also you have to look at wood management in Ireland, you know, and wood management comes at a cost. And I know this was covered last week in a separate discussion, but wood management in Ireland is probably as good or better than it is anywhere else in the world. You know, and that is talking about the use of first, second fill casks as opposed to fourth, fifth, and sixth fill casks, you know, which are common in other markets. And that comes at a cost, and that has to be factored into.
Yeah. But I mean, having limited sources of aged stock, you know, I'm talking about 15 years and upwards, really, to be going into, and maybe I'm talking about the super premium category. But yeah, obviously that makes us perhaps less competitive, or does it not? Jerry, you were about to answer that.
Yeah, I was just going to say that certainly Red Spot was mentioned there, and obviously Red Spot has, you know, the Marsala wine cask from Villa Florio in it. Coming from Sicily, and obviously there's a huge cost to shipping casks to Sicily, getting them seasoned and shipping them back to Middleton to fill them with aged stock of, you know, to fill them with whiskey for 15 to 19 years. You know, that there is a massive cost to that. So I think the price is pretty fair, in my opinion, benchmarked against the other whiskies within the range of the Spot range, but also the competition as well. And, you know, it is a lot of money. And like, don't get me wrong, I think, you know, €100, €150 for a bottle of whiskey is a lot of money. But it is reflective of the rarity, the cost of producing that whiskey. And, you know, it's something that would have been laid down nearly 2 decades ago. Like, I think that's absolutely, you know, phenomenal sort of thing, you know, to think of the amount of time that it takes to produce these whiskies. And you can pick up bottles of gin there that were made yesterday, and they were nothing wrong with gin. Don't get me wrong, I'm quite fond of gin sometimes when I'm not drinking whiskey. But basically, they're made yesterday, and they can sell them tomorrow, and they're selling them at €50-60 bottle in some of the premium gin cases. And you have a bottle of whiskey that there's been a huge cost in raw materials, in energy and production, you know, and in wood management, as Jarlath said, like the cost of these barrels, you think is somewhere like Middleton, you have over 1.8 million casks under Kevin O'Gorman's control. Like it's a huge amount of wood, but the majority of it is for one brand, and we have very limited stock of aged stock that you're talking about, and that's what goes into the likes of the Middleton Very Rares, the Redbreast 21s. And, you know, we'd love to put all of that out in the market, but we don't have huge amounts of it of this age. And like in the last year, we've seen massive growth in these whiskies. So I don't think there's, in my opinion, I think it's a fair price. But then again, I do understand it is a lot of money. So it is a yes and no answer, as Jarlath said.
Yeah. Ruth, I think you were, in the fortunate position where you did have quite a substantial amount of aged stock. Was that one of the factors in determining whether you're going to go down the premium route? And again, I'm saying premium. I'm probably talking super premium if there's a technical definition of it.
Yeah, I suppose, look, we were incredibly fortunate to have the stock there, but it wasn't without a plan, and I think you can see from the Brabazon series, or, having started with the Revival series and then having grown to the Renaissance, like, we can't keep the stuff on the shelf, the demand for it is huge, and we're constantly trying to find replacements for them as they do sell out. And I think to Jer's point there, like, people are willing to pay it, and I think it goes back again to the credibility point. People trust that the Teeling brand is going to provide them with an experience, with a taste, the depth and diversity that we've been talking about, and so they're willing to pay that higher end price because they know that the liquid in the bottle is going to be worth it. And I think it comes down to the packaging as well. Like, an awful lot of time and effort and energy goes into the weight of the bottle, the size of the box, the branding on the front of it, and that all has to be taken account for in the pricing.
Sure. If we talk about packaging.
Go on, Serghios.
No, go on, Don.
I know. I want to bring up maybe the elephant in the room, that some of the pricing and maybe things that people reflect negatively on the pricing is the secondary pricing. The fact that Irish whiskey today is like the gold rush of the Yukon Valley of the 1870s, that people know and are maybe prepared to pay X amount for a whiskey, never open it, knowing that it's going to appreciate quickly. Is that just something we have to learn to live with, or is it something that's maybe unfortunately beginning to reflect negatively on some of your brands? Nobody want to talk
so
about
we talk about premium and super premium and ultra premium, meta, luxury, all of these. I mean, it is a subjective thing, and it is the very first thing that Jarlath said was premium is subjective view. Sometimes it can be from a brand owner's point of view, but you have people, because of the fact that that we're only starting, which I felt a bit insulted by, the way. But anyway, we are only starting in this sense, and I understand what he meant. That there is this novelty factor. We now have 38 distilleries on the island, when 10 years ago we had 4 or 5, or 12 years ago. So, you do have this novelty factor. You have distilleries producing some stock themselves. If the age stock that was there before is limited in any case and is running out. So you'll have people who want to buy it as a collectible. You'll have people who want to buy it to flip it, as they say. And then you might have the odd one who wants to buy it and actually wants to drink it. And I think that's what I want to see more of, is people buying it to drink it so that they'll get an empty bottle before too long, so that they can buy something else and discover something else. This sort of discovering Irish whiskey is a theme that we're using it, in the context of the Irish Whiskey Association, obviously. But like, there's so much to discover. You talked about diversity in Irish whiskey earlier. It's massive, and I really, how can I say this in the best way possible? I think it's a pity that there is so much there's so much approach to collectibles. That I don't think I don't think it helps the message or the overall sense of, we want to be the French of the wine industry. That's what we want. We want people to think Irish whiskey. Now, what else is there to drink? And that's a dream that we're going to get to at some stage. But if we're into collectibles and we're into flipping because of unique once-off bottlings that'll never happen again, etc., I don't think that helps, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Jer, you were
I think there's
as well.
Sorry, go ahead, Ruth.
I was just going to say, I think there's two types. I think there are, thankfully, the people who are willing to buy it to drink it and give you the feedback and tell you how how they enjoyed it. And then there's people who'll buy two, who are fortunate enough to be able to buy two, who will drink one and keep one. And then there are the people who, maybe don't even enjoy Irish whiskey that much, but can see the value in it, and they're the people that are just keeping it to flip it. So I think there's a range of people in there that are either enjoying it or collecting it to flip it, as we say.
I mean, is it damaging for the brand to see these exorbitant prices being paid for? I mean, I know you guys don't have control over the secondary market, of course, but to see some of the frenzies that do happen, many of you have released a product and it sells out in hours, and then next day you see it on an auction site or on Facebook somewhere, somebody trying to flip it. Is that damaging for the brand and damaging for the category, more importantly?
I don't think so personally, and the reason I'd say that is because this is not just an Irish whiskey phenomenon. I wouldn't call it a problem. It's a phenomenon. If you look at Japanese whiskey, you look at John is very familiar with both Johns are very familiar with Scotch whiskies, but certainly with Scottish whiskey, you look at the likes of Macallan, you look at some of the small releases from distilleries in Islay, you look at Taiwanese whiskey. There's this absolute, what I would call, insanity sometimes when it comes to the pricing around the secondary market. But the secondary market is the secondary market. I would argue that ourselves, we produce whiskey for people to drink first and foremost, that it is a product that is accessible. If it's on a limited basis, it's because we only have X amount or so much of something. A lot of the innovation in the last number of years has come from trying new things, and then when you release those onto the market, and particularly something like the Method of Madness range, or to celebrate something like the 30 years of Redbreast, with the 10-year-old Redbreast, people really we're in a different place. Irish whiskey is in a different place than it was, for example, when we released Mano Love in 2014 or 2015. It took 4.5 months to sell half of what we sold in one day with the Redbreast 10-year-old, because there's a lot more consumers drinking Irish whiskey. They're drinking from all over the world, and so in a way it is a byproduct of the success of Irish whiskey. So I don't think it was something that was inevitably going to happen, that there was going to be this interest, because back when you could buy and then, as Billy Lighton there says, he works so that people drink it and appreciate the whiskey. He's not thinking ever about the secondary market, but certainly hopefully that explains where I'm coming from, that basically it is something that was inevitable, that was going to happen if we continue to be successful with Irish whiskey. Because back, if all of us were smart enough back, I'm sure Ruth is just as long involved with the rest of us in Irish whiskey. If you think about the bottles that passed you by, Ruth, or you, John, that you at the time could have picked up, or Jarlath, and you kind of thought, sure, that'll always be there. And then you see the price of them now today, and like there are bottles of whiskey that I used to, Jameson 15-year-old is one example. We were selling it 3+1 bottles back in 2001, because we have to get rid of this stuff. 3 bottles plus 1 free at 40 quid a bottle, and now they sell for many hundreds of euro. And it's kind of one of those things. The market has moved on. The volume of consumption is there. There's a huge demand for Irish whiskey because of the success of what of what Jarlath is making, of what they're making down in Tullamore, what they're making in Teeling, what we're making in Middleton, and it is a byproduct of that success.
I would probably just add to that I'm a big advocate that whiskey should be a luxury experience, and that the actual drinking of the whiskey should be a luxury experience. And I guess that what's happening is maybe it's showing that we're having success with that message. You know, I mean, the collecting thing, the hoarding thing, it happens with all luxury items, be it watches or cars or wine or whatever. You know, it's just something that comes with luxury items, and if it's happening, it's because we're having a bit of success in placing Irish whiskey in that luxury sphere. The downside of it for us in Dunnville is that you lose your brand advocacy. You lose the guys that open the bottles and then tell the world how good it is. You know, and third party advocacy is the best thing that we can have. You know, and bottles on shelves that are not open don't get that message through. So, you know, that's the biggest downside for us when bottles not being opened, is that you lose your brand advocates to an extent. You know, the guys that open the bottles and then sing about how good they are.
But that's why I love whiskey tastings, Jarlath, that we can all sit down and we can all try these really rare, expensive whiskies, or whiskies that you can't buy anymore. And then people like Potstill will, as basically given away half his collection to whiskey societies, and, you know, so that we could all try these historical whiskies. And, you know, you have to make the point to consumers sometimes that you relish this moment, understand what you're tasting now. Probably you won't ever get to taste again because it'll be locked up in someone's collection. So it is, you know, it is. That's why I love sharing, and whiskey's about sharing that experience, isn't it? Like you've done it with me, Jarlath. We've been at Whiskey Live, and you pulled me aside and you said, "Here, try this. This is something I've got going on. What do you think?" It's great. I love it.
Yeah, and in saying that, Jer, in Belfast Whiskey Week, in Belfast Whiskey Club last week, we opened a bottle of Jimmy 15 for a charity event. I think it was my own bottle. You know, I mean, the bottles, they are there to be opened. You know, and especially those, you know, the Marylebone Lanes, the Jimmy 15s, the Teeling 24s, you know, the Tullamore Phoenixes, you know, I mean, these are all bottles that you just have I have just to open and share, you know, I mean, that's I mean, that is the pure joy of it. Sitting in the house drinking it by yourself isn't half the fun. It's just not, you know. So yeah, getting these bottles open and shared, but unfortunately, like I said, the more liquid attractions not to be opened and shared with friends, but to be flipped for a profit in the future, you lose that brand opportunity. You lose people talking about it.
I'm just looking
I have a
forward
question,
to
and it kind of be foolish maybe to ignore it. And people have asked the question: is, you know, are whiskies being released now by producers at the prices that are reflected in auction price?
I don't think so. Not from our point of view. From Irish Distillers, I know, because I'd be involved in those discussions about the price. We look at the range. So if it's a product within the range, and we benchmark it against other products that are competitive internationally, so Scotch whiskies or you know, American whiskies that are in the same sort of category. You know, you're just trying to get a bit of a sense check of where it would fit in within the portfolio that we already have. So I certainly wouldn't be looking at auction prices. I know, and I have seen that there has been cases where some distilleries outside of Ireland have put products up at the price that they're selling at auction when they come out the next time, but that's not certainly how we would approach it, I have to say.
There's a bit of a thing for me, which is that it depends on, it sounds like an old record, but it depends on what you're in the business for. If you're in the business to sell whiskey and to have people drinking your whiskey and loving your whiskey and employing, in our case, 100 people in the distillery in Tullamore and all of their families and all the attendant services that supply the distillery and keeping them all in livelihoods and all of those things, which is good for everybody, good for society, and the whiskey is fantastic as well. We would never set out to see what this whiskey might be like at an auction. I mean, we have an 18-year-old single malt. It sells in markets for about $120 bottle. I mean, that's not an excessive price for an 18-year-old single malt 4-cask finish. So, like, I don't think from like what Jer says, what we do when we look at our whiskey that we have to launch, that we have to introduce, we're looking at where it's going to sell. Who's going to drink it? What are the consumers who might like to taste our rum cask finish XO and what they might want to pay for that? And it's certainly not. We're not going to price it at a point where nobody will want to pay for it or want to buy it, but wants to put it on auction. It's not. It certainly wouldn't be the business we'd be in. Yeah,
I think what you said there, John, just about who's going to drink it, that's always the number one question, because if they're not willing to pay the price for it, there's nothing worse than sitting on cases and cases of whiskey that's just costing you money to be sitting there. So I think, sometimes when you look at these auction sites, they're going in for less expensive than what they can buy it on the website for and things like that. So I don't think you can get involved in that game because it's a messy one.
But inadvertently, are these prices on auctions doing our industry a favor insofar as all of a sudden when things are going for multiples of what they were purchased, are people sort of saying, well, it must be premium, it's got to be premium, Irish whiskey is at a different level?
John, I think we've totally underperformed at the super premium level, and I mean ultra premium level. And I know these are all jingoistic kind of terms, but they are actual categories. And if you think about it, there are and has been Scotch whiskies selling at hundreds of thousands of pounds, and that are incredibly rare with handcrafted packaging. But now we're seeing whiskies. You think of the Silent Distillery, the Silent Distillery from Middleton. They're whiskies that you could have only imagined, a decade ago, and they are drawing attention to Irish whiskey. And I think it is important for us to be taken seriously, going forward as an option for these. There is a market that I don't live in, certainly not, but there are people that have a huge disposable income and they enjoy, as Jarlath was saying, luxury, this luxury drinking experience. And it's certainly an area that is underdeveloped within the Irish whiskey category. And I think there's a big opportunity for us to play in that market. And I suppose the rarity, because there's so many, there really wasn't a huge amount of distilleries, as we know, until the last decade or so. So this has meant that there is going to be, hopefully the excitement is what comes in the future, but there is not a huge amount of historical whiskey. So that means that the price of it means it's very rare, that the price of it will be quite expensive. And I certainly think that there will be a desire by people to consume this whiskey because of its rarity and because of the quality of it. I've one thing for certain, that there's great quality in Irish whiskey and will be with all of the newer distilleries that are producing whiskey. But the ultra premium category is something that's totally underdeveloped compared to our Scottish cousins, or even the Japanese. And you just think of the prices of some of the Japanese whiskies that, John, you know very well. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. There's a question here, and I think it's a right question, and maybe I'll target this to Jer and maybe to Ruth as well. I mean, you have whiskies in the multiple thousands available. How many of them are actually opened? Are they used as a commodity? Are they used as a prestige, just to have in a collection and maybe at some point sold on? But I agree with Sean. I would imagine that a 40,000 or a 10,000 bottle is not very, it's not opened.
You'd be surprised, and there are individuals that I know that have purchased these bottles in Ireland, in the Irish market, and they have purchased them for their own pleasure. Some of them as you said, to simply own, like they have full Middleton collections. They have, and you know how much they cost to either put together or to purchase, and they have a large amount of money. They're wealthy individuals and they want to own these items. Look, it's a bit like I like having the dream cask, and I'm lucky enough to try it because I work for the company, the Redbreast Dream Cask, and I try and get my hands on a bottle every year. Yes, believe it or not, I have to apply like everyone else to the ballot to get a bottle of Redbreast Dream Cask. They don't give me one. I think we should start a campaign that I should be given one anyway. But what I'm
Your
saying
campaign. We'll set up a fundraiser for you on a page.
Yeah.
But
you have no
That's
chance if you move to the States, Jer. You have no chance of getting one if you live in the States.
Oh dear.
that's no. We
Now. Let's move
just
on.
prior to this,
Sorry.
let's move on. But that's fixed, John. But what I'm saying is, there are, my level is, 500 quid for me to spend on a bottle of whiskey is a lot of money. I've 2 small kids and a dog, and and I don't have a huge amount of disposable income. But for me, I love to spend my money on, on something I really desire and want to possess. And I do my best to try and get 2 of them, but usually only ever get 1. And certainly I have opened one of my own. And certainly I think there's people at a certain level of income that, mightn't be yourself or myself, that do have the means and that's their level they operate on, basically.
Yeah, I suppose I'd agree. I think, like I was saying before, I think there are 2 types of people. There are the people that, do open it because they want to enjoy it with friends. There's also a certain amount of prestige there that they want to be seen to be opening a bottle of Teeling 24-year-old to enjoy with their friends, to show that they can and that they have the disposable income to do so. But unfortunately, there are an awful lot of collectors out there, and we see that especially with Teeling, given the vast array of SKUs that we do have, that there are some people out there who have them all, and even if you were to ask us, which ones that are out there, they'd have a better idea. But, I think it does come down to people and how they want to spend their money. And for some people, it's a hobby. It's a hobby to buy it and drink it. For other people, it's a hobby to buy it and flip it. And I think there's just they're 2 different people, and it just depends on what they're in it for,
Yeah. Well, I have to say my collection of Ferraris is parked up, and I don't drive them too often. But someday I'll take you out and all of you. No, it does happen. It happens with runners. It happens. The runner is worn once. Yeah. It's the same thing as. So there is a collectibles market, and I guess we can't ignore that. I just wanted to talk then about protecting the category, because, if I go tomorrow and I source a young spirit and I spend a lot of money creating fantastic packaging that might, I don't know, cost me hundreds, and then I put it on the market for several thousand, how do we protect the consumer against that? Because, there is an obligation, I feel, that the customer needs to be protected and well informed on things that happen like that. And I suppose, John, that's falls a lot into your realm.
Yeah, I was speaking again with somebody else, another person today. Imagine I was talking about other people. And honestly, some of the time I listen as well. And he said to me he went to Provine one year, which is in the sort of wine and spirits thing, Germany, exhibition in Germany, and everybody gathers at 9 o'clock and the event opens at 10, and all the exhibitors chat. And this man asked him to come over. He said he's a distiller, and asked him to come over and look at his glass bottle collection, which he was trying to sell to drinks manufacturers, let's say drinks producers. And he said the bottle was absolutely stunning, most incredible fitting for the top, etc., etc. He said you couldn't believe how beautiful it was. And he asked him how much was that bottle, and the man said 500 euros a bottle for the glass. And he said, and we will sell this bottle to different drinks companies, and they will buy it, whether it's whiskey or cognac or whatever it happens to be, and they will buy it, and they will then sell on the product afterwards. And his whole point was that the risk you run is that you have a package in terms of what it contains, the whiskey, that's a lot more valuable, or costs a lot more to produce or to buy than what's in the bottle. And then is that what people are buying? Are they buying the package, or are they buying what's in the bottle? And for some people, packaging is the thing. It does for other categories, not just for whiskey and not even just for drinks. But it does beg the question, at what stage do the connoisseurs, the know-alls, do they actually know? And the point of this discussion is what's in it for the connoisseur. What's in it for the connoisseur is to know stuff. I was going to say to know shit, but you can't say that on this program. But to know stuff.
There's a bit of editing I have to do now.
Okay, sorry for that. But to know stuff about what's in the bottle and then validate the purchase you make. Say, I'm prepared to spend 200 quid for that because I know it's good. But if it's all about the packaging, then Serghios, I take your point. It is something that would concern me. Yeah, sure. I don't think it happens much in Irish whiskey, to be honest.
Is there anything that can be done, maybe at an IWA level, that can protect the consumer?
Well, what the IWA does is protects the consumer within the parameters of the Irish Whiskey Act, let's say, or the technical file verification files, so that nobody can pretend to be an Irish whiskey that isn't an Irish whiskey. But if somebody puts what qualifies as an Irish whiskey into a very, very expensive package and charges a really high price, there's nothing we can do that can stop them charging that price. There's nothing. I mean, if it's a legal Irish whiskey and it's declared Irish whiskey on the etching on the front of the bottle because they wouldn't put a label on it for obvious reasons, you know what I mean? Then we don't have a leg to stand on as the Irish Whiskey Association because they're not breaking any of the rules or the laws. I mean, certainly it's not something that I would ever consider.
So it comes down to education then of what, you know, and I know you all play your part in educating the community and passing the message of what real Irish whiskey is. But there were a few questions in here. So Belfast Whiskey Week hours. So Paul Kane through. Okay, so he's talking about Teeling Distill 355 year at 40%. It's a long question.
I don't think it's a question.
Matt's equation.
No, it's a statement, really.
Yeah.
Well, Ruth, maybe you want to respond to that.
Yeah. No, it's. I have a question on this. Well, no, slightly off this topic, I suppose, but still valuable along the lines of you've put it in good packaging and you're packaging it up and you're saying this is premium. Are we also relying on industry accolades and awards a little bit too much? At certain times of the year, when you have the big awards released, everyone's out there. We got gold, we got double gold, we got best in class, we got whatever. Are we trying too hard to try to make a name for ourselves as opposed to just producing good whiskey and letting people try it?
Well, I think awards are a good guide for consumers to basically give them the confidence to spend that extra money on a product. And if it's won Best Irish Whiskey or at the Irish Whiskey Awards, or it's won whatever it is from a competition like the San Francisco Spirit Challenge or something like that. So, you know, one of the big awards that we recognize globally, all of us in the industry, I think it helps consumers to give them that comfort that when they're making the purchase that this is going to be a good product, because you can put finest whiskey on the label, but what does that mean? You know, whereas if it's an award, at least I feel, oh, someone has tried this and they said it's pretty good. You know, nothing is stronger than the recommendation from either a bartender or from a friend of yours to say this is a good whiskey. But if you're buying it as a gift and maybe you're not a whiskey drinker, awards can be helpful in guiding consumers to the brand. And like, you know, I think I know from my own sense internally, we're probably guilty of not talking about the awards enough because we have such depth within the portfolio that, you know, there are whiskies that have won awards and they just don't understand the value of them, even, you know, putting it on the label. Like, but certainly for me, I think there is a place for awards. But, you know, I'm very myopic. You'd be kind of looking at the Irish market because I spend so much time here, and the Irish Whiskey Awards are a big one for me. I put a lot of value in them because they're blind tasting. I know how they're put together, and you know, I respect.
Well, the consumers deciding as well. I mean,
exactly. That's it.
You know,
that's why.
I mean, there are some competitions out there. I think if you know, if you just turn up, you're going to get a silver medal for effort, you know. And then there are those
participation award.
Yeah, a great effort
Like the
award,
sport.
and here's a silver star. You know, I do feel that some of them are money-making exercises in terms of, you know, you buy your table and you turn up, or you pay to enter your bottle and you'll get something. Obviously, there are some very credible ones out there as well.
Yeah, and that's
absolutely.
the challenge.
Yeah, I was just going to say there, like, obviously there's an awful lot of them out there these days, and obviously between ourselves here, you know, which ones mean something and which ones don't. Like for us, obviously winning the world's best single malt for the 24-year-old was absolutely huge, not only for Teeling but also for the Irish whiskey industry, being the first Irish single malt to win such an award, you know. And I think obviously awards like that, you know, are what help to grow brands and give consumers confidence in not only Teeling but Irish whiskey. But it is knowing which ones mean something and which ones are just on the bottle for marketing purposes, you know, which even coming from me, there are a few out there, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say about the awards, you know, when we get them, we want to talk about them, and you know, because they validate what we believe ourselves, and we're going to talk about them. And you know, and they're obviously, as the guy said, some outstanding awards that, you know, the credibility is not. There's no question around the credibility of how the award system works. But then you also get the publications. You know, there's somebody who writes a Bible on whiskey, you know, and if he says X, there are so many people out there who I see on social media suggesting that the Bible of whiskey would be such, and that's one person's view, and it may be even an ill-informed view, you know. So I think we need to be careful about publications and even awards, and be a little bit discerning about them. That's hard to tell the consumer that. It's hard to tell the consumer, you see, that award, it's not a great one, whereas that one there is a good one. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so, and we are a bit guilty as producers ourselves, saying whenever we get an award, if we decide to talk about it, we'll feature it. But then we all know, in this group, we all know the awards that stack up and I think have credibility, you know? You've
identified a niche for me there, John. I'm going to set up an international award for the best awards. And I think, because that's a tricky one, all right. But
you might have a bigger competition if you set up for the worst awards.
Well, that too. Too many entries.
Jarlath, you're trying to get in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think what John's trying to say there is that all awards are BS unless you win them. But to an extent, which is, you know, but I think in back, you know, the awards that are consumer-led, the awards that we know are consumer-led, and blind tasting, the Irish Whiskey Awards being the prime example, you know, are and should be valued. I think it's a case of you build it and they will come. You know, if you make the very best product you can, the awards should come. But going back, you know, even to the price of whiskey and the secondary markets and our whiskies overpriced and all, the consumers have never been more informed than they are today. You know, they're informed through awards, they're informed through peer-to-peer and social media. They're informed through tastings. You know, there is guys that open bottles, be that, you know, clubs from Dublin, Cork, Belfast and Kilkenny are further afield, you know. So these bottles are being opened and bottle shares are happening. There's a lot of peer-to-peer conversations on social media and other channels. You know, the consumers are more informed than they ever were. Awards, it's a small part of that. And that's why I think, you know, even in the pricing, I think the pricing isn't so much of an issue on the ultra premium products, but if it's overpriced, you'll be called out, because you're going to do your research before you buy it at that price. And if you do your research, the proper research, the information is there. Maybe not so much in the £25 bottle. You know, maybe that's more of an impulse buy. You don't do your research. But I think on the higher end bottles, people now they're not going out and buying a £125 bottle of Dunne without knowing what they're buying, to an extent.
Yeah, look, I'd like to play devil's advocate a bit there, Jarlath, on the sense that, you know, there is a lot of information out there. There's no doubt there's a lot of information out there. You know, it's like TV stations. There's a lot of TV stations out there. 99% of them are BS, if you describe them that way. So it can be very easy to misinform the customer. I mean, I don't know how many bottles I get here, and how can I be independently critical of something? If something comes in with a nice package or whatever, and I think it's what you see online happening an awful lot as well. Not just bloggers, writers, societies, whoever receive bottles and they talk it up a lot of the time, and sometimes it just doesn't merit it. So how do we distinguish there again? You get was it malt reviews, who are very difficult people to please, and they they would be one of the first places I would go to get honest opinions. But there are, for every one of those, there's 10 others that are maybe not so reliable,
or back to being subjective.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah.
The thing is, sorry, Jarlath.
I guess for me, that's where joining. I can't advocate enough joining a whiskey club. Joining a club of 30 or 40 like-minded individuals, conversing with them. That I think that's the most valuable information you'll get. Is that peer-to-peer from people in clubs.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most significant.
Again, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It does put liquid on liquid, and one of the most significant changes I've experienced is certainly the huge amount of clubs and bottle shares that you do have available to make your own informed decision on, without having to rely on anybody else's opinion. So, you see, what's happening with Belfast Whiskey Week. You see what's happening in Belfast Whiskey Week and Live, and then Dublin Whiskey Live, and then all the different societies, Kilkenny, Guilds, and all the rest. I mean, I think that's where the brands have been actually very strong in supporting those clubs, and I think it is important for the general consumer.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think over the last 15 months, it has become even more important. And maybe at the beginning of the first lockdown, it was like, how are we going to get liquid into people's hands? You didn't have Whiskey Live anymore. All these global trade shows had been shut down, and I think, I don't know about you guys, but I think the energy that was at the Whiskey Live in 2019 in Dublin was huge, and I think there was huge potential for it to grow after that. And then we were hit with the pandemic, and I just think everyone had shown up so well at that, and there was huge energy in terms of how people were being presented. And I think then we had to look elsewhere, and I think the whiskey societies, not only in Ireland but across the world, have been phenomenal. We just did a collaboration with the Greek Whiskey Society, and it was the first time they'd ever done something like that for their 200 years of independence. And they were all doing those bottle shares and everything, and we did 2 collaborations with them, and their opinions are the most worthy, in terms of feedback and things like that. So
the Greeks will tell you what they think.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
They won't hold back.
How would you know?
It was all good, thankfully.
Sure. Yeah.
But actually, the growth of whiskey clubs, I would say the growth of whiskey club is huge. And in Ireland, we're kind of catching up, and Irish Whiskey Society is around a long time, but all the whiskey societies and clubs are catching up. I mean, I think in Germany they have 600 whiskey clubs. In Sweden, they think they have even more. You go to one small town in Sweden and say, we're the first whiskey club in Sweden. Well, there's 11 other clubs in this town, not to mind. So the whiskey clubs are huge for spreading the gospel, spreading the word, and it's not a Bible, even if it's a gospel.
Yeah, I suppose to start bringing it back to where we began, insofar as what is in it for the connoisseur. So using your crystal balls, what's the future holding for, without specifically your brands, but for the industry and for Irish whiskey in future? Where are we going to see this growth? How are we going to get this growth? And what's going to grow this growth?
I'll take that
ball,
one.
anyone?
I'll take that. I think for me, it is definitely creating a premium Irish whiskey category. And again, we're here in Ireland, all of us, and you can sometimes look at the market here and say there's loads of diversity in the premium Irish category. But in reality, when you go to markets, again, like the United States, our biggest market by volume, and you see the opportunity is massive. Canada, the opportunity is massive. Russia, the opportunity for premium Irish whiskey is massive. So I really think that the opportunity is in growing premium Irish whiskey and creating together a premium Irish whiskey category in markets like, in the United States, Canada, but also Japan and Asia as well. So I think that's where we're going to get the growth. So premiumization, and then also growing it basically together as an industry with diversity, just kind of having a coordinated approach of, one voice of how we approach these markets through the Irish Whiskey Association, and together loosely about just collaborating. Like even myself, go back to a city like Austin, the brand ambassadors from Tullamore, brand ambassador from Jameson, they used to collaborate all the time. They'd work together just to make sure that they got into certain outlets, and Teeling as well. They'd all work together in Austin, and I saw them do it, and it was a way of them realizing they were stronger together than apart. They were all on their own, three individuals, but if they worked together, they were able to achieve a lot more. And I think as an industry, we should work together on premiumization.
Yeah,
I recall, Serghios, maybe in 2015-16, we done a night in the society, the state of the industry, the state of the spirit.
Yes, that's right, with the Irish Whiskey Society. Yeah,
it got quite a ruckus night, but it was a Whiskey Society tasting. I think the guys from the D.E.W were across. I think Tim was there from Tullamore and different guys. And the biggest problem then from the guys was, Irish whiskey's not diverse enough. There's far too much coolie with, not enough finishing on it. You fast forward 5 years, and the issue a year or two ago was, our distilleries releasing their liquid too young. Now our problem is, how do we control secondary pricing? The problems are getting better. But also, but also, where I made the point back then 5 years ago that we are where we are with Irish whiskey. We're in the middle of a renaissance. We now have 38 distilleries. The majority of those are less than 3 years old. I think ourselves, Teeling, Dingle, and probably Pierce Lyons have 6-7 year old spirit. That's probably it. The rest are just coming on board. We are where we are. We can't rush that process. It takes time. In 20 years' time, we'll have 40 distilleries, all with 20-year-old spirit. The diversity is going to be, it's going to be unreal. At that point, then you get a proper industry around it. You get W.D. O'Connell's and Chapelgate doing your Gordon and McPhail, your Cadenhead's job, and you start getting, a blend of northern malts or a blend of western malts, and your timorous beasties, and et cetera, and there's just so far to go in this Irish whiskey renaissance. People talk about this being the golden days of Irish whiskey. They're 10, 15 years away. Yet, and we can't rush that. We'll get there when we get there, and all we can do is just control it in between. But certainly, that's the nature of Irish whiskey. And I think, that as we get 20, 30, 40 distilleries bringing on their own liquid at a certain age statement, then, that's the other side of opening up markets, of opening up the Asian market, the Russian market, capitalizing on Canada, America, South America, etc. There's a big job to be done in distilleries in Ireland as well as in markets internationally.
I suppose I know you want to finish, Serghios and John. I don't blame you. And for me, on the premiumization,
that was about an hour ago, John.
Okay, Serghios, I'll go then. All right. But for me, like these chats up to now have been rightly so focused on the amazing distillers, the blenders, and the finishing and all of that. And I think the one thing is we're not doubting our ability to produce great premium whiskies. And the only thing I'll say is that we need also to get people drinking them. Do you know what I mean? That they're consumed and people talk about them and whatever. Not just a lot of people producing a diverse range of whiskies. We need everybody to be talking about Irish whiskey in a category or in a brand sense, whatever, and espousing and people understanding that it has huge quality credentials, and here's why, and here's how you should be drinking it. And for me, that's much more important than people buying for collectibles or people buying to flip it on to somebody else because it's an investment. I'm laying it down for my grandchild. No, drink it for God's sake. Drink it and love it and tell everyone you know. That's what I would say.
Yeah. I think the connoisseur is in the best position really at the minute. I think, it's already an exciting time and it's only going to get better. And I think it's about all of us bringing them on the journey with us through education and talking about it, as you say. And I think the Irish Whiskey Association and are doing a hell of a lot to help with that, and it's definitely a exciting times ahead.
I mean, I agree, and I don't think not only just the connoisseur. I don't think people mind paying the fair price once the quality is reflective of that, and that's the biggest concern. I've seen lately some emergence of ones that are priced well above and beyond what their quality would be. And I suppose that happens in every category of everything. It's one of life's woes, if you like. But I think in general, what we've created a category that is premium, and in a lot of cases is punching well above its weight in that category at that price point. And I think it's important that Irish whiskey is recognized in that category because it helps all the core products as well, not just the premium category.
And just, Serghios, fully agree, but also, what you're doing for the category as well, with your magazine and the absolute, premium nature, the writing, the reporting in that magazine is helping the category too. So, you're as much a part of it, and well done on what you're doing.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not going to disagree, but what I'd like to say is that, whiskey in any category that is of a quality and at the price point for that category, can be, seen as being a good product as well. So, promoting quality and price, they have to be intertwined at some point. I suppose, of course, age and rarity come into effect. And I do think we have a higher cost base. And because we're new, we're still finding our feet in areas in terms of trying to reduce our cost base. Even when it comes to bulk buying a cask or bulk storage of cask, I think our economies of scale will be better over time and we'll be able to produce even better whiskey at a more affordable price than it is.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody got any points they'd like to raise, I suppose, before we start winding things down?
I just see JQ's cheerleaders are in now.
Oh,
so I just had a glass to raise rather than a.
Well, do you want to give us a nice toast then, John? Because we're either going to get John to give us a nice toast,
I'll join you,
or we're going to get Jer to give us a nice song. So
Jer, I'll vote for Jer the song. Jer the song. Jer, can you stay on mute, Jer?
I'm just going to freeze.
Yeah.
You do it very well.
Just like last time, boast about reading the Telegraph and then say nothing.
Yeah. Was that a boast?
Thank you all very much for your thoughts. Okay. I think we'll cut Jer off before we.
Oh, thanks.
But there must be a toast. There must be a toast to music, is there, John?
There's a toast to music. Oh God! Well, here I'll give you a toast that's appropriate to.
Yeah, let's do that.
So, may the roof above us never fall in, and the people below it never fall out, and that's important for the Irish whiskey industry now. That everybody works together, and fair play, Serghios and John, putting on a great series, and to the colleagues in the Irish Whiskey Association who work with this as well. It's thank God we work in this industry. Imagine if you worked in another industry, and there's loads of people on this call now saying, "Oh God, I'm only a fan of Irish whiskey. I don't work in it." But anyway, aren't we very lucky people? And long may it continue. Even for old people, Okay, if my boss is listening, long may it continue. Yeah?
Well, look,
Lunch,
thank
everybody.
you all very much.
Lunch.
Cheers,
Lunch,
guys.
everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thank
Cheers.
you.
Take care.
Thank you all.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lunch it.
Lunch.
Sláinte.
You're going to kick us out now, I'd say.
I'll take you out, or do you want to? Well, John, what do you think?
Yeah,
That was-
great insights.
Yeah, fascinating to hear from you. I enjoyed that now, I have to say.
Yeah, no, it was good to get different perspectives, from people who've been there, done that, and in Ruth's instance, a marketing look at the industry from a newer point of view, So I think, yeah, brilliant.
I mean, we
brilliant.
asked them. I think we
chat.
asked them the difficult questions, and they handled them well.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think we asked the questions that people,
yeah,
want
to hear answers to.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
well, look, all our guests, thank you so much for taking the time
Yes.
to join us. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have done, please do give the channel a like or subscribe. And we'll have some breaking news tomorrow ourselves from Irish Whiskey Magazine. And look forward to chatting to you all next week, where we talk cocktails. So good evening, everybody.
good night.